2 Timothy 1. Let's look at verse 13. We're going to cap it off, try to wrap it up and put a bow on that so we move on to verse 14. Boy, that sounds awful. I don't even want to go back and count the number of days I've already been hacking away at, digging away. But you know what? On the other hand, this is like mining diamonds. There's just stuff here. Okay, what you have heard from me, keep as a pattern of sound teaching with faith and love in Christ Jesus. Now, we talked a ton about it. I've gone quite a ways into faith and love. And let's talk about in Christ Jesus. But before we do that, let's talk about what's the point of keeping this pattern of sound teaching with faith? I mentioned to you both faith in God, and I think from my pastoral experience, I think it could also involve faith in people. If you're a pastor and you don't have a belief in the people you're leading, that they have both the desire and the capability to respond to God and grow more deeply into His design, that's going to be it's going to be really unsatisfactory for you. But the poor people under your care, they're just going to come away from every sermon, every teaching, bruised and bloody because you're beating the thunder out of them because of how bad they are. And guess what will eventually happen with that? The number of people that keep coming back for the beatings will grow smaller and smaller and smaller until you have a few masochists who are left there because this is their best bet of getting what they deserve. And these are sick people. And it sounds like I'm being very accusatory. I guess I am. The other side of that is, this is reality. Okay, but if you keep this pattern of sound teaching with faith in the people and faith in God, and by the way, it starts with my faith in God. It is coupled with my faith in people. You know what? There's this other third side of faith that has to do with faith in myself. Faith, this is in God, but faith that He has entrusted me and will empower me. And so in that sense, faith that is at work in me, I have to trust myself as well. If interesting idea here, I think. If you trusted yourself as much as God has trusted you, would decision-making be more difficult or less difficult? For me, as I've thought about this, I think decision-making would be less difficult for me. Okay, so faith. And then love. How you apply the pattern of sound teaching begins in faith, and then you apply this in love. And with that, I'm just thinking now, I really am thinking pretty strictly in terms of the pastoral leadership, because that's the direct connect here with what Paul has written to Timothy. If it's applied in love, then there are a few things that are going to happen. First of all, the motive will not just be rule keeping. Now, this was the Pharisees' issue. Their application of what they thought was the pattern of sound teaching was Obey, 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 obey. Here's the checklist, and if you're not doing everything on that checklist, then, in honest, my experience in the church is there are times when I've watched leaders work off this checklist of, are we doing it? Are we doing it? Are we not? And if we're not, then snap out of it. Well, I probably wouldn't surprise anybody. Those churches didn't thrive. And I'm so grateful. I've really not been deeply tied to those churches. I've watched them. I've been exposed to them. And occasionally, I have had the experience with certain people who want to live off a checklist. Well, am I saying that the whole law, these expectations, these commands, they don't even exist? Quit hurting yourself with them. Just do what makes you feel good. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is God's design, well, it just comes down to this. There is a way things work. And when you discover how things work and you get on the working side of things, things work well for you. Okay? Now, that's true for all kinds of things in life, but it's especially true for the eternal pieces of life. And even that phraseology is poor, because it's not like you've got all these unrelated pieces out there and you got to smack them together and cram them into. No. God's design is, on one level, God's design seems complex. There's much to it. On another level, it's simple. Jesus boiled it down to, on the level of commands, there are three things that I look at the words of Jesus, and really I'm most concerned, I'm most interested with what Jesus has said. He said, when asked, what is the greatest commandment? He said, the first and greatest commandment is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. And the second is, love your neighbor as yourself. These were not, these two commands were very unticky-tack, in my opinion. These had little to do with what food you could eat, what food you couldn't eat, with how you conducted the planting and harvesting of your fields. And if you go back to Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, there are, well, I read one scholar who said there are 360 different laws and commands just in, well, you have to go back to Exodus partially. Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They are the books of law. Well, okay. Jesus said if you wanted to boil it down, here's what it comes to. Love God, love people. That is pretty simple to state. And then he, on the night of his betrayal, he was in the upper room with the apostles. They had observed an early Passover meal on Thursday, and Jesus said, I'm giving you a new command. A new command. This was not a reiteration of the old. This was not further elucidation on it. This was a new command. As though, this is an interpretation that I hold to, as though Jesus were saying, I have reset the table. The game has changed. It's more than a game, and he said it this way, I'm giving you a new command, that you love one another. That's not new. As I have loved you, that's new. Because the Old Testament called for, and what Jesus referred to in love the Lord your God and love your neighbor, that was in the law. That was the old command. And the absolute finest refinement and application of all those laws. And now Jesus says a new command, that you love one another as I have loved you. Now, I've got a few minutes left, and I want to flesh out a little bit on what's that mean, and what does that look like. If I'm going to love as he has loved me, okay, there's a couple of ways to look at that. If you read that in the word as to carry the meaning of because or since, love one another since I have loved you, because I have loved you. Well, okay, even that was new in terms of command. I think more reliably it would be, instead of because I've loved you, it would be in the way I have loved you, as I have loved you. Not since I have loved you. And yes, that's in there. But add to that, in the way I have loved you. Now, here is, on one hand, that is magnificent. That, and it gives me something that I can figure, I can work with, right? It's almost like, oh, okay, these are the instructions. The downside is I can only love another as Jesus has loved me, to whatever degree I understand how Jesus has loved me. And there are a lot of people, Christian people, who that's never really got on their agenda. Identifying, even discovering how Jesus has loved them, let alone the implication of that in terms of their love for others. And this is, I'm not talking about people who just don't care. I'm talking about people who don't know. Since I'm on a high horse and I've got about a minute and a half to go, I'll just say, there are a lot of people that they've misunderstood how this dynamic works, because they're trying to take Jesus' love and what they've experienced of Jesus' love and cram it into an already busy, complicated, obligated life. And they find it difficult. And it's hard. What if we organized our life around loving others the way Jesus loved us, and began with identifying, because this is how the only way it works is, so how does and has Jesus loved me? That's your homework for this time. How has Jesus loved you? And that serves as your model for how you would love others. Oh boy, we got to talk a little more about that, and we will next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.